Hello, everybody, and welcome to MySec Jackson. Woo!
Woo!
Right. And today we have Greg from White Knight Labs.
That's all right. Pass it over to you.
Yeah, a quick primer of the company. So White Knight Labs is a small boutique offensive cybersecurity consultancy. It was the brainchild of myself.
This is partner John Steigerwalt. We started White Knight Labs. Well, he founded the LLC in 2016. I came on board in late 2020, and our trajectory has been almost straight up ever since then. So we do a lot of testing and red teaming for the Fortune 500, all the way down through the SMB market to literally 10 employee companies. So some of the new initiatives that we have at White Knight Labs right now is in January, we're kicking off our own live training. We'll be teaching the offensive development course once a month. It's going to be John and myself teaching that. We also have an offensive Azure course coming out that we're going to be teaching. And we submitted for Black Hat this year, but we don't know if we got in yet. So some other stuff, we're teaching at Hack SpaceCon down in Florida, and then Hack Miami as well in May. So with no further ado, we'll be giving a talk today called Calling Windows APIs with Rop Chains. We're not going to get into Rop as much as we're going to be talking more about thread pools and just like new Windows API primitives for doing process injection that are not currently detectable by endpoint detection response products, EDR. Yeah, sweet. Offense. So quick primer, because I'm not sure what the audience level is. So quick primer on the Windows operating system, Windows internals. So where Microsoft wants you to program for the Windows operating system is right at the Win32 subsystem layer. That's going to be that high layer up there, like kernel 32, user 32, GD32, DLL, where we actually do a lot of programming for writing malware, like loaders, implant dev, that kind of stuff, is at the NT-DLL layer. And not shockingly, that's the lower level, like AV and EDR products tie in and hook certain malicious Windows APIs is right there at the NT-DLL layer before there's the syscall into the kernel layer. The kernel layer being that large rectangle below the black bold line. Cool. So let's go over a quick primer of what a normal, this is a very boring shellcode loader using all the normal Windows APIs that you would normally see for remote process injection. And this would be operating at like the Win32 layer, like the higher layer of the operating system. So virtual alloc, reserves commits changes the state of the region of pages in the virtual address space or of the calling process. RTL move memory, that's for just like copying your shellcode into that buffer that you allocated. You can also use write process memory for this, or in C programming, there's this function called memcopy that's built into the C programming language. That's not really a Windows API, but you can use it for just copying raw blocks of memory. And then virtual protect, you always want to change your memory permissions. You don't ever want RWX memory because that's a tell for the EDR product. If you ever open like Process Hacker or Task Manager and you're looking at the permissions for the memory that you allocated, and there's RWX, it's like a private commit. That's a tell that shellcode was written there. Create thread, that's where we kick off our execution. So that's when you actually see like the beacon in Cobalt Strike or Metasploit, whatever you're using for your callback. There's tons of stuff that you can use besides create thread. Create remote thread will be used for remote process injection. Create thread is for local process injection. Funny enough, in the offensive development course that we teach at Wallace Hacking Fest, John wrote a loader called Greg's Best Friend. .exe, and in Greg's Best Friend, the loader, it was defeating EDR because it was using a Windows API that's commonly used for remote process injection, but he was doing local process injection. So basically, the destination and the source memory address were the exact same, and like the product couldn't catch it because I guess that's not something that people normally do, and it wasn't. So it worked for like 2 months, and then we made it public, and it never worked again, obviously, because everyone was like, virus total! What's that? So cool. Now we're going to do just a walkthrough of virtual alloc, the API call, no hooks. I don't believe in live demos because the demo guys do not love me. So this is pre-recorded. So this is just the same loader that we were looking at. This is in IDA. So interactive disassembler. If you guys are familiar with IDA or IDA Pro, maybe use it at work. We're just going to follow like the call stack down to the NT-DLL layer. And this is with no hooks. If I can hit play. Come on, Gregory, you can do it. Ugh. Okay, so there's the call to virtual alloc. We're going to set a breakpoint, F2. We're going to go to dynamic execution. Sweet, and there's CMD kicking off, blah, blah, cancel. So we're in the text section because that's where our shellcode is. Now we're in kernel 32. So we're right at the 132 layer right now. So after this next call, we should go to kernel base, and we did. So now we're going to go down to the next call right there. We're going to follow that. Come on. And that's the NTDLL layer. So that's going to be like the last call before we flip the dip switch and go into kernel mode. So as you can see here, there's no hooks right here. So we had to move RCX into R10, move 18 into EAX. So 18 would be the SSN in this case. 18 is the green there. And this is like critical to this entire talk. You have to understand how syscalls are used within the Windows operating system. Every single Windows API has an SSN or a syscall that is attached to it. So this is how the operating system knows what is to be called in kernel land, because the operating system doesn't actually know virtual alloc because it doesn't like read words, right? It reads ones and zeros. So 18 would be the SSN for virtual alloc in this case. And then the last call is just the syscall. The syscall is going to be actually calling the 18, which is virtual alloc. No, I want to go to the next slide. Enter. There we go. Okay, so as we can see here, I already talked about this, but the move RCX R10, that's what's called like the prologue before we do the syscall into the kernel mode. 18 here would be the SSN, the system service number. So I know what you're thinking. If we actually use direct system calls, we would have to manually go through and map all those syscalls to those Windows APIs, but the work has already been done for us. Giroux has this website called syscalls NT64, and he's already mapped out every single syscall for all the direct syscalls. Okay, so now we're going to do a quick primer on EDR user mode hooks. So malware.exe, that would be a malicious binary. It calls kernel 32, like we saw in IDA. Then kernel 32 makes a call to virtual alloc and kernel base. We're getting lower in the operating system now. Then kernel base makes a call to NTDLL. That's the last user mode layer before we flip the dip switch into kernel land. So the EDR will hook right before the syscall in the kernel mode, and then there will be some like telemetry that goes on, like it'll look at how does your memory permissions look for your shellcode, etc. And then if the EDR's telemetry comes back like it's good to go, then they will actually do the system call into kernel mode. If it detects maliciousness, it'll obviously not let your binary run. Okay, so observing EDR's hooks on virtual alloc, things to pay attention to, what are the modules that are loaded, what happens at the NTDR layer, what is the name of the EDR's DLL. I love using like Process Hacker or WinDBG or IDA for this. So if you, in IDA specifically, if you're using like a certain EDR and you can get a trial of that EDR product, you can just like drop the binary in IDA and look at the loaded modules once you go into dynamic execution. And like if you're going against CrowdStrike, for example, it'll be like UPMCC64, I think is like the DLL that CrowdStrike injects into every single binary. SentinelOne has their own. They basically all have their own. So First Intercept XEDR is Hitman Pro, I believe, DLL. But that would be the active protection DLL of the EDR product. A while ago, you could actually just like write your binary against an engine, and it would just tell you what EDR product. So say like you wanted to use a certain loader against CrowdStrike, you can run your binary against this tool, and it'd be like, okay, CrowdStrike would intercept this, and this EDR or this Windows API call, but you could like change your loader so that to use different Windows APIs calls, so to defeat those hooks essentially. Okay, cool. We're gonna do some more IDA stuff here.
I'd say if you see a lot of EDRs kind of, they do adapt when they see an exploitation of a while of a certain attack type.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen them start to adapt to some of the techniques that we're talking about so far?
Absolutely. Yeah, like direct system calls don't work anymore. Now we're using indirect system calls and ROP. So everything's going to be the same. This is the same loader that we were just using, vanilla loader.exe, but now we're actually using it on a box that has a Sophos Intercept X EDR installed on it. So we're going to see a hook now. So now we're in the text section. Now we're on kernel 32. We're going to follow the call to kernel base. Same thing here, kernel base to NTDLL. Now we're in NTDLL. And what don't we see anymore? We don't see the prologue to the syscall, right? All we see is jump, debug 027. Things are getting weird. HMP alert.dll. So that is the active protection DLL for Southwest Intercepts XEDR. And then off to the right, which is in like a really small screen that says modules, you can actually see HMP alert.dll. Not sure if you guys can see it on the screens. Actually, on that screen, you definitely can't see it.
Yeah, I think it's just a stream, but the actual content that goes to the YouTube channel to see it better.
Okay. Okay, so direct system calls, there's a problem and the solution. This was solved about a year ago. So using direct system calls is not sustainable because Windows API opcodes change with every single major release or update. For example, look at the Windows API called NT-delete key. Excuse me. So over these various versions of Windows, it was like Charlie 5, then it was Charlie 6, Charlie 8, etc. Same thing with NT-delete object audit alarm. It was Charlie 6, then it was Charlie 7, Charlie 9. So imagine if you like hard-coded these direct system calls into your loader to call them, but then you actually go to do your red team operation and like they're using the raw version of Windows and like your stuff's not going to work, right? So Hell's Gate for the win here. You basically dynamically resolve the system service numbers at runtime to eliminate all the boilerplate code. You don't need kernel 32 or kernel base DLL. You only need NTDLL. There's less opportunity for EDR EPP detection. So NTDLL is parsed memory. And by the way, this technique of using like the PEB-defined addresses in kernel 32 is not new. This has been around for like 20 years. You can find evidence of this in like the early internet. So how does it work? Git pointer to thread environment block. So in 32-bit versions of Windows operating system, that's going to be like FS30. If you're going to do a PEB block for 64-bit Windows operating system, it's going to be GS60. Then use the tab to get a pointer to the process environment block. You can deliver entry from PEB. You go to the second entry in the in-memory order module list to find NTDLL, and then you get the headers, and then you calculate the EAT's position memory. EAT being the export address table. So every single binary has an import address table and an export address table. The import address, if you have like just an EXE, it's going to have like a very large import address table and a very small EAT because it like consumes functionality from the operating system, whereas a DLL is the opposite. A DLL, think of it like it gives functionality to whatever you're doing. So like kernel 32, the EAT is going to be massive, but the IAT is going to be small, and then the opposite for an EXE. Does anyone know, I mean, there's only 3 of you, do you guys know like the lazy way of resolving Windows APIs? Like git load library, git proc address. You can do it in like one line of C code, essentially. But if you do that, Sysmon and like every EDR in the market, they're going to catch it as like an image load event. So you don't really want to do that anymore. Unless you're going against like some trash product. Yeah. Okay, cool. So we go over this. So direct system call graphic. So essentially, you're basically calling your malware.exe. You're doing a prologue to move RCX into R10, move SSN into EAX. Check on learning. What was the SSN for virtual Alec? Boom! It was 18. Yeah. So anyways, this used to work. It doesn't anymore. We're going straight from the binary to the kernel. So we're bypassing kernel 32, kernel-based DLL, and NTDLL, and we're doing it all the work ourselves with this boilerplate code. Do you know what the detection is for this?
Looking for any processes that don't look.
So every function has to return, right?
Yeah.
If you were returning a system call in the Windows operating system, what would be normal? So remember, we're doing the chain here. Kernel 32, kernel base, NTDLL, kernel. We should ret back to NTDLL, right? And then we should like follow the chain back up. But remember, we're going straight from malware.exe to the kernel. Then from the kernel, we have to ret back to the binary, right? So if you just check the return address, it's going to point back at the binary. It's not going to point at NTDLL.
That'll show up for you. Yeah.
Yep, it's like a stupid, easy detection, actually.
The memory fuzzy side, yeah, that's fine.
Yep. So this is just going over more Hell's Gate. And if NTDLL is already hooked by EDR, your code will just crash. In the year 2023, NTDLL is always hooked. Even like a trash EDR is going to hook NTDLL. Okay. So I just talked about the detection for direct system calls. If you look at the first bullet point, syscall execution takes place directly in memory area of the direct system call assembly outside of NTDLL. So remember, malware.exe, we did the syscall for the prologue for the syscall right there in the binary. We didn't follow the chain down and have the prologue happen at NTDLL before we went into the kernel. So that's detection. Also, the second one, the syscall ret instruction memory address resides in user-controlled memory outside of NTDLL. Boom, red flag. So the detection comes from the IDT, the interrupt descriptor table. That's going to be in the kernel. Basically, the kernel is going to look for the return address of our binary, and it's outside NTDLL. Boom, you're shut down. So third bullet, ETW provides a systrace feature which can be used by a kernel driver to determine where the syscall originated came from. So not only are we busted when we leave the kernel, we're busted like when we came into the kernel in the first place by ETW.
I think the next question was like, have you seen EDR like take more advantage of ETW in general to kind of detect that?
Yeah, like I'm a huge fan of Microsoft. That's like probably dirty for a red team to say that, but I think like everything will end in the kernel. Like MDE, I think is a great product because they have their own kernel driver. For example, like Microsoft kicked like all the AV EDR vendors out of the kernel a long time ago because what happens if there's a crash in the kernel? Yeah, exactly. Right, it's dead.
It's kind of cheating, actually, with Microsoft.
Yeah, it really is. Just like the sheer amount of telemetry that Microsoft gets from every single workstation on planet Earth is insane.
Yep.
We had a really cool project, John and I, when we were at VDA Labs. That's kind of like where we cut our teeth to like get to where we are. It was our first job in offensive cybersecurity. While we were there, we got a gig with Microsoft to increase just like kernel security for Windows 10 operating system. It was called the Octagon Project. But they showed us like all of like sort of like the hidden telemetry that's coming out of like every single box. Like, oh my lord! Oh. And even when you turn off like you know the automatic cloud submission, like stuff is still going out.
Okay.
Like the only way to be sure is to kill internet access to your box.
Okay, you said like exploit guard and that insanity.
Yeah, exploit guard is like a legit piece of kit.
Yeah.
So the next step in the evolution of offensive cybersecurity was indirect system calls. So everything is the same except everything's the same as direct system calls except we can evade IDT kernel callback checks. We'll create a gadget to jump to the syscall address in NTDLL. Return address is spoofed, so that source, like where we're coming from and where we're going back to, we're going to solve that problem with indirect system calls. Avoids EDRs that don't use ETW. I always strongly encourage if you are going to use like a non-Microsoft EDR product, make sure that it's using ETW, that it's working in conjunction with Defender. For example, Sophos Intercept XEDR, if you install it on a Windows 11 box right now, it will turn Windows Defender off. And if you do that, you have to roll your own AMSI DLL provider, and Sophos's custom like AMSI DLL provider is trash. Like if you just like type Mimikatz in the PowerShell, like that'll fly right through the AMSI provider that Sophos brings. So mainly swaps registers. Syscalls are dynamically resolved with math because math is awesome. So I'm going to stick with the same theme here. We've been using NT allocate virtual memory the whole time. So you see our 18, that's going to be the SSN. So direct system call, ASM file declaring the global variable, and then on the right we have the indirect system call, ASM file. ASM is just short for assembly, declaring a global variable. Okay, so what is the indirect system call special sauce? This is basically it. WNT allocate virtual memory. So the syscall, this is going to be kind of a wild ride. Just try to stick with me. The syscall value is the fourth index, also as like the fifth byte, because in an index is like 0 is always the first spot. This is universal for the syscall prologue. So remember, like we had the move blank into REX and then move the SSN or the 18 into another register. That's what I mean when I'm saying we're talking about the syscall prologue. It's the exact same across all Windows APIs. There always has to be an SSN. That's why this technique is universal across Windows APIs. And then the sysadder NT-allocate virtual memory, adding 12 to the base address of NT-allocate virtual memory, because as we all know, in memory, the stack goes down. That's why when we talk about doing math, that's like what this is. We're just adding and subtracting. I hit enter there. Oh, that is my box. Did that just happen?
It's okay. We can cut that out later.
Yeah. Yeah. X64 debugger is just like so much more aesthetically appealing than IDA to me.
Yes. Yes, it is.
So we just looked at like the fourth byte there from the top. In the memory map, you see like 4C, 8 Bravo Delta 1, Bravo 8, 18. 18 is the SSN. So that's the index that we're talking about. All right, I think the video is done. Yep. So the next evolution from indirect system calls is ROP. So return-oriented programming. We're not going to get too much into this. I'm going to talk more about thread pools for process injection than ROP. But basically, ROP, for calling those APIs, you gain full control of the call stack, which we didn't have with indirect system calls. You hijack control flow, and then each frame of the call stack will have its own return address, or also known as a gadget. So Microsoft does have special memory protection against using ROP chains and ROP gadgets. It's called control flow guard. So like you can find like DLLs and like executables that aren't participating in CFG, which is what we would do. So this is a really important line here. CFG extends previous exploit mitigations technologies such as GS, DEP, and ASLR. Do you guys know what ASLR and DEP are? Like data execution prevention and ASLR, address space limit randomization. Yeah, so like in ASLR, every time you turn your box, like kernel 32, kernel base, and TDLL, they'll have the same memory address across like until you turn off your box again, but everything else will have a different memory address. I'm not sure if you guys, have you heard of this company called Optiv? Matt Eidelberg, he came up with this technique called freeze. So he basically uses the fact that like kernel 32, kernel base, and TDLL all have the same memory address across executions. I think he's over at Black Hills now. He just switched from Optiv. Okay, so as you can see here, this is the same loader that we've been using the entire time. That would be in the CFG table, the control flow guard table. Are you guys familiar with like the layout of a PE file, like the sections? So there's like the text section, the data section, the resources section. The vast majority, if you just go into GitHub and you're looking at shellcode loaders, I think the new one is like Carocan. Secure this shit just came out with Carocan like 3 months ago. But the vast majority of those are going to put the shellcode in the text section. Obviously, at White Night Labs, we don't want to do what is like the new novel thing, so we always use the resources. But in this case, we're using the text section here. It starts with 6 Alpha Charlie 8.
That's still been pretty common for text messaging using where people put shellcode, if they change does it depend on who the author is?
I would say it's the sign of sort of like a novice malware developer if they're using the text section. We just have so much luck with the resources section right now, but eventually, like, that'll get burned too, just like everything else gets burned. Yeah, there's only so many like places we can shove the shellcode in the PE. So. So why will control flow guard not stop the shellcode execution method? Control flow guard will block any indirect call originating from an invalid function address. However, wow, I had a typo in this. This is like the same talk I gave at the con. Indirect calls need to be called from a valid start address, not from anywhere else in the text section. So Microsoft actually provides an API for shutting down control flow guard. It's called set process valid call targets. and you can use it to disable control flow guard for a particular location in the text section. So like say we were trying to use this technique, but our shellcode was shoved in like the resources section. You could not use set process valid call targets for that method to turn off CFG in like the resources section. Okay, so. RX. So, okay, I got it. So, in a direct system call, the execution will occur from RX memory in a user mapped section in user mode. It will go down to the kernel, and the interrupt descriptor table will basically catch all of this because you're basically making a call from you're calling a system service number, the syscall, from basically your own binary as opposed from NTDLL. So you're busting on the source and destination of the execution. And then the indirect syscall, there's going to be a call to NTDLL, and then a call down to the kernel node, the interrupt descriptor table. Then you're going to ret back to NTDLL, and then you're going to go back to your binary. The only problem with that is that ETW can look at your call stack and realize that it's basically bunk. When I say call stack, do you guys know what that is? So ETW actually has telemetry where it can look at every single memory address in your entire stack. So like this called this, called this, called this, and then it rets all the way back up. ETW can still bust the indirect system call method. The problem with why ETW threat intelligence is not able to currently detect the ROP method is because you're basically using a custom call stack, and you're separating the allocating of memory and the executing of memory into two different call stacks. So when ETW looks at it, it looks completely normal because ETW wants to see like allocate memory, write like shellcode into memory, execute shellcode for like getting a beacon back, but it can't see all those things because we're separating the execution. Okay. This slide can
I just checked.
Okay. Yeah, no worries. So this slide actually shows it a little much better than I was just talking about it. So all these methods. So the first row, direct system calls. Direct system calls will bypass user-led hooks. It will not bypass the IDT, the interrupt descriptor table or callback hooks, and it will not bypass ETW threat intelligence call stack analysis. That indirect system calls bypasses the first two. It bypasses the IDT and callback hooks, but it won't bypass the call stack analysis because ETW threat intelligence will look at the call stack all the way back to the binary, whereas the IDT will not. All the IDT cares about from the kernel is where's the first destination going back to. So in indirect system calls, the first destination is NTDLL. So the IDT is we're clean, but we're not actually clean. And then ROP bypasses all of them because in ROP, we're basically creating an entire call stack that is completely clean. So when ETW unravels the call stack all the way back to the initial execution of the binary, it doesn't see anything wrong. Cool. So since we dropped this research at GERCON this year, there's been tons of new POCs using thread pools for calling Windows APIs. SafeBreach just dropped a new tool. I think it's called Pool Party, which is way more creative than we did. We just call it thread pools for calling Windows APIs, which is super boring. Anyways, so thread pools for calling Windows APIs is just a new set of Windows API primitives for writing orders. So callbacks that work within their own synchronous thread. What are thread pools? Users can configure their own functions to run their own thread. That's why when I mentioned ETW threat intelligence can't detect this method because we're creating various threads. It needs to see the entire call stack being malicious to detect it. So if we can schedule a piece of code to run its own thread and we can schedule arguments for our custom function, we can create a gadget. So the gadget data will be stored on a stack and dynamically executed at runtime. So the RIP will jump to NTDLL and execute our code, then ret to its own thread. A gadget is literally just a piece of code. So if you were looking at an IDA, that last call before like the very first thing I showed you in IDA, we were following like kernel 32, kernel base, NTDLL, and then we saw the prologue for virtual alloc and the system service number right there. That was like 4 little assembly opcodes. That would be a gadget. It's just basically a piece of code that does something.
Okay.
So using our thread pool primitives for process injection, acronym PI is process injection because I'm lazy. Same old process injection technique. Only difference is using thread pool primitives now. So what are our Windows APIs here? We're using TP alloc work. We're using NT allocate virtual memory for allocating memory. And then we have TP post work and TP release work. Those are like the Windows APIs that we're using for our process injection. If you guys want to do additional research on this, look at Safe Breach. They just released Pool Party, like I said previously. Oh, I actually answered your question that you just asked like 2 minutes ago. And my explanation was that exact thing. So what is a gadget? A gadget is just a piece of code that runs. For example, this is the prologue for NT allocate virtual memory. This would be an NTDLL. It just does something. So what does this gadget do? It moves RCX into R10. It moves the system service number for virtual alloc, which is 18 into EAX, and then it is a syscall. Syscall being going down to the kernel, and then it rets. So ROP gadgets execute without any interaction from the user. So this is the loader that we used thread pool primitives for. And yes, that is code blocks because I'm old. That is not Visual Studio. Yeah, that was basically me just like showing that, look, it does work, we did something. So do you guys remember, God dang it. I want to pause right here. Pause. Okay. So remember I was talking about the peg walk earlier and dynamic resolution, and we talked about like the lazy way of dynamically resolving Windows APIs. I want you to look at like find int main and then go 1 line down. So the example I used was get proc address and load library, but you can also use get proc address and get module handle. You'll have the same effect. So in this loader, we are not using the peb walk. We're doing it the lazy way. If we were doing an actual red team engagement, we would do a peb walk or something a little bit more significant, like API hashing. Okay. We're kind of like flying through this. Do you guys have any questions?
No, you just reminded me of how much I've lost before I became a manager. So we used to do a lot of memory forensics.
Okay.
And so basically finding these pieces of memory and basically finding the call and going back and like what we actually call this and how people can hide things in different ways.
Yeah.
So you're just reminding me of all the things I forgot. So I love this. This is fantastic. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. So the team that you like directly manage, they're probably super technical, I'm assuming?
Yep.
Okay. How big is the IR team?
So we're 4 people right now.
For all consumers?
Yeah. But that's focused only on detection engineering, threat hunting, threat intel.
Okay.
Just those pieces. Then we have entire other ops, we have engineering. Yeah, the whole org is like 120 some people.
Okay.
So we've
Is that like blue team, red team, threat hunt, IR? Is that's developers, everybody?
We do, yeah. So we have like a red team that's external and internal that we do stuff. We lost one person that was there that we're actually getting some back into that.
Okay.
But what we usually will do regular engagements and basic test teams, do all that stuff. We'll do more process injection. I'm sorry, not process fix, but in general, just malware execution environment.
Okay.
And then we'll take our after action review, go through that, look for detection, see what we can and can't see, and then also do our additional research for additional tools we need. We use a lot of Microsoft tools, and they can only get you so far, and then you have to do the next step and dig in. So whether you've got a memory image, then go back through and do analysis later, try to do that in an automated fashion. That's a lot of our goal today.
Yeah. Did you follow that whole chain about like the APT that was on Microsoft's internal network, and they took the crash dump and like pulled the keys out?
That was fascinating.
That was such a nasty kill chain. Oh my lord!
But they've been sitting on.
And they got away with it too.
Yeah, they must have been sitting on that for a while to figure out all those pieces too. Like,
yeah.
They've been in this environment. It's fascinating.
The fact that like Microsoft like thought they triaged it, they like did forensics, and they still didn't catch it, like incredible work.
Yeah.
So as far as like your annual cadence, do you guys do like one internal penetration test, one external, or in a red team?
We do quarterly.
Okay.
Usually the normal cadence will do quarterly internal
Mhm.
and 1 to 2 external, depending.
Quarterly, you're doing that?
Yeah.
Holy, jeez, man. Okay.
So we like to give you that a lot.
Okay, yeah, clearly. In like more red team, it's all just penetration testing?
That's what we consider red team is, a little bit of penetration testing and also just general like. So it's when our program was more active, because we had some of those dedicated to it. That was a month company, so we had switched gears. But what we're bringing back is that focus for next year, and that's what we'll do. So it'll be that red team will be kind of everything under the sun. Whether it's going to be application security, whether it's going to be pen testing.
I would love to be on that work. Let's talk after this.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get back to this. The inception begins. So what if we provide a pointer to a Windows API and then an argument as opposed to pointing to the start of our shellcode? So imagine like in normal vanilla loader, the pointer has to point to the shellcode. What if it just points to an argument as opposed to the start of our shellcode? So we're going to execute a function as opposed to shellcode in this case. So the first argument is a worker structure. As you can see here, type def nt status. I'm not going to read the whole thing back to you. It's just like the first line of that code. The second argument is a function callback. The third argument is an optional argument that gets passed to the callback. Fourth argument is a callback end. So there's a line right up MSDN here that you guys need to pay attention to. Integer arguments are passed in registers RCX, RDX, R8, and R9. So like if you look at an MSDN, if you look at any Windows API ever that has arguments, like the first argument is going to be sitting at RCX, the second argument is sitting at RDX, R8, R9, etc., so on and so forth. So you can actually like manually like manipulate the registers yourself if you want to. So executing the library. I know that's like a lot of like boilerplate code to just call it execute load library, but it's worth doing it. So PTP, work callback, my callback, that code. By the way, I keep like using the word custom call stack and call stack analysis, that kind of stuff. This is what it would look like. This is your call stack analysis. So if we were just like looking at Metasploit, like a binary, this would be all garbage. It would be super easy to detect because you should see things like NTDLL, DLL, RTL user thread start, etc. It should look like this. But if you're using something like Cobalt Strike or Metasploit and it's not like modified at all, it's not going to look like this. So very easy to detect. So this slide, execute whatever the hell you want with a clean call stack. So that's our load library A. Remember, like we manually built the load library A, moving the things into the registers ourselves, the arguments, because now we know what is held in each of those. Each argument is held in like RDX and R8 and R9, etc. So we can do that ourselves. We don't need the loader to do it for us for Windows. So create a structure and pass it to a gadget because we know where everything is supposed to be. NT allocate virtual memory of all the arguments. We manually built it. I don't like this line, but I didn't want to put like a peb block in here. As you can see, like the second line of the second block, we're still using like get proc address and get module handle. That will get you busted. So remember peb block, API hashing, anything so that we don't have to like manually resolve that. Oh, something didn't cover. Do you guys know why you don't want like malicious Windows APIs to be called in your loader? So like the import address table, like in IDA, you can look at the import address table. You can look at it in x64 debugger. That's like static analysis. If like the EDRC is like three Windows APIs that are used in a row for process injection, you're busted before you even dynamically execute. So
Yeah.
okay, so normal NT allocate virtual memory API call. So this is what Microsoft is expecting for the NT allocate virtual memory call, and this is just right at MSDN. And this is what the gadget looks like. So we're only able to do this because we know exactly where the arguments are supposed to be because MSDN told us, right? So this is a global variable called work callback, and then we're basically manually building NT allocate virtual memory, a gadget. So back to your question before, what is a gadget? A gadget is just a function that does something, it executes, and then it rets. And the last line, the jump to RAX, that's basically just the function retting. Normally we would say ret there. So high-level overview of technique. TP-alloc work API creates a new thread in TTLL. So think of TP-alloc work like NT-allocate virtual memory. We're basically like creating space to shove something into in memory, right? Then TP-alloc work can run any function as a callback. TP-alloc work takes one argument, which is then passed as a second argument. TP-alloc work then calls NT-allocate virtual memory, which is a pointer to a structure that contains NT-alloc arguments. So remember, like, as opposed to getting a pointer to our shellcode, the start of our shellcode, we're getting a pointer to the start of an argument that calls other arguments, or a function that calls other arguments. So TP-alloc work calls the work callback Rop gadget, which is a pointer to a structure that holds NT-allocate arguments. So that's basically a high-level overview of like one API. You'd have to do that for every single API in your loader. So usually a loader is going to have 3 or 4 APIs at least. So, like I mentioned previously, since we dropped this at GERCON this year, there's been like a bunch more proof of concepts that have shown up on GitHub and LinkedIn. They're like, look at this new method I discovered. But like, no shit, there's tons of meat on this bone. Like, these are all thread pool API primitives that can be used for process injection, maybe not all of them, but like, so there's thread pool, alloc, ALPC completion. Like, this is the area that we're exploring in White Night Labs right now. We were going to do this research at Sans Hackfest, but John and I ended up not going after our talk got accepted. But they're just like, there's like 100 of these sitting in the export address table if you look at NTDLL. So, but so if anyone's listening, go look at thread pools. That's it, man. I think that's it. Yeah, it is.
You want that?
Yeah, I will stop sharing.
All right, that's everything from my sec, Jackson. See you guys next month. Unless there's other questions.
So it's kind of funny, I
Easy
gave
plans,
a talk on like using all these profiles in Cobalt Strike at my Grand Rapids, and I finished the talk, and I looked at the